Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder 3. Strange things that happen here. How stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Welcome to Strange Things, broadcasting from the Raimundo Rios Mayo Library in Arkansas. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Today is April 22nd, 2017. This is season number 2, episode 16. Tonight we're going to be talking about some strange beliefs. I got up Tuesday morning and pulled on my favorite Terry Pratchett t-shirt and sat down to come up with an interesting show for Saturday. I thought about it for a few minutes. Then I looked down the front of my shirt at the picture. It shows a tune, the great space turtle, with the 4 elephants stationed on its back, holding up the disc world on their backs. Suddenly, I knew what the show was going to be about. If you're wondering what all that is about, you haven't read Terry Pratchett, and you're lacking in your humor department. You should read his books if you claim to have a sense of humor. The folks living on the disc world believe the before-mentioned concept about the great Attune, and this might strike some as odd, but then there are folks living on our planet that think things far beyond anything Terry Pratchett ever dreamed up. Let's have a look at just a few. The whole flat Earth idea has been around since man first looked down at the ground under his feet and realized he wasn't floating off into space. It wasn't until the Bronze Age in Greece that folks began to think of the Earth as something other than a flat surface, drifting around the sun. Well, they did think that the sun rotated around the earth and not vice versa. Learned men such as Pythagoras and Aristotle thought the earth might not be flat. The idea of a spherical earth appeared in Greek philosophy 300 years before Jesus was born. They had decided the earth must be a globe. But the idea of gravity didn't get thought up for a while yet. The concept of a sphere for the earth appears in Plato's Phaedo, but Aristotle elaborated on the idea and estimated the size of our planet. So the big thinkers all knew the earth was round and not flat. The common man didn't think about it. It wasn't anything to think on, since it didn't put food on the table. The flat earthers said, no, the earth is flat, and water falls off the edges, then was whisked back up over the disk, where it is then fallen back down as rain, replacing what was lost. In school, you might have heard that Columbus's crew were all afraid they would die when they fell off the edge of the planet. Well, not so. This idea of his crew fearing the voyage was created to make the trip sound so much more dramatic. They were risking life and limb simply by sailing, which back then was far more dangerous than falling off the edge of the planet. Columbus had too many prospective crewmen, and he had to chase some of them away. Everyone wanted to go because this was how you got rich. If you were not born to wealth, you went out and stole it. 1956, Samuel Shenton set up the International Flat Earth Research Society, better known as the IFERS, in Dover, United Kingdom, as a direct descendant of the Universal Zetetic Society. This was just before the Soviet Union launched the first artificial satellite called Sputnik. Well, Shenton responded by saying, "Would sailing around the island of White prove that it were a spherical? It is just the same for these satellites." He was saying that the satellite was going around the edge of the disk, not around the flat part. His primary aim was to reach children before they were convinced about a spherical Earth. Despite plenty of publicity, the space race slowly eroded Shenton's support in Britain until 1967, when he became famous, or infamous, due to the Apollo program. A photograph taken from the moon kind of proves the roundness of the Earth, but then lots of folks still say we never made it out of our own atmosphere. In 1972, Shenton's role was taken over by Charles K. Johnson, a correspondent from California. He incorporated the IFERS and steadily built up the membership to about 3,000. Shenton spent years examining the studies of flat and round Earth theories and proposed evidence of a conspiracy being levied against the flat Earth idea. The idea of a spinning globe is only a conspiracy of error that Moses, Columbus, and FDR all fought. His article was published in the magazine Science Digest in 1980. He goes on to state, "If it is a sphere, the surface of a large body of water must be curved. The Johnsons have checked the surface of Lake Tahoe and the Salton Sea without detecting any curvature. How about taking a look at the Pacific Ocean? Out there, the horizon is curved." The society declined in the 90s, following a fire at their headquarters in California and the death of Johnson in 2001. However, it was revived as a website in 2004 by a Daniel Shenton, who, oddly enough, is not a relative of Samuel Shenton, which you might call a mere coincidence. Now, then again, we all know there is no such thing as a coincidence. The new Shenton believes that no one has provided sufficient proof that the world is not flat. Is it just me, or do these folks sound a bit off between the ears? But then there's a group who say the earth is round, but that it's hollow. This at least makes a little more sense. According to the ancient Greeks, there were caverns underneath the surface, which were entrances leading to the underworld, some of which were the caverns at Tonarion in Laconia. The underworld wasn't so much a hollow space, but a series of interconnected caves. The earth was kind of like a giant circle of Swiss cheese. Over the years, people have been convinced that there were people, or sometimes creatures, living deep beneath our feet. Possibly the first person to scientifically speculate about a hollow earth was none other than Edmund Halley, of Halley's Comet fame. He proposed in 1692, as a way of explaining anomalous compass readings, Halley's theory is that the planet is a series of nested spherical shells spinning in different directions, all surrounding a central core. Admiral Byrd may have entered one of these openings, which was supposed to be about 4,000 miles across, during his 1947 and his 1956 Arctic and Antarctic expeditions. The great unknown to which Byrd referred was the iceless land area inside the polar concavities, opening to the hollow interior of the earth. His logbook is filled with entries along these lines, but when he got home from his explorations, he was told to stop talking about the earth being hollow. It might scare people. We're going to take a brief pause here and play a couple of commercials, so don't go away. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Do you have skin? Would you like to take better care of it? Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and set up an appointment. Call 723-3019. If your vision isn't what it used to be, and you're not sure you're seeing Bigfoot or just your neighbor mowing his lawn, stop on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle del Norte, just across the street from the Embassy Suites. You should be able to see what you're looking at. Looking for a great cup of coffee? Swing on by the Organic Man Coffee Truck, 1002 Iturbide, Suite number 7. Not a coffee drinker? They have hot chocolate, hot tea, and sometimes muffins and cookies. It's a great place to meet your friends for a conversation or curl up in the corner with a good book. The Organic Man Coffee Truck. Life is too short to drink bad coffee.
No, don't say goodbye. Stay with us. This is Arkanasa Radio. Quédate con nosotros. Estás escuchando Arkanasa Radio.
You're listening to Strange Things with Chris James. And welcome back to the show. We were just talking about the idea that the earth might be hollow. In 2015, Dr. Agnew was planning an expedition to the Arctic Circle in an attempt to find the entrance to the inner earth. He was signing people up who were willing to go along in an effort to both help pay for the expedition and help out with some of the physical work as well. Unfortunately, the expedition was called off when the icebreaker the doctor had reserved was snatched from him by the needs of the Russian government. Now, what if? Just for a minute, think about it. Maybe the Earth isn't hollow, as the hollow Earth maps show, but honeycombed with thousands of miles of underground tunnels and caves that are inhabited by some unknown beings. Perhaps openings like Mel's Hole and the Borehole to Hell in Russia are actually openings that lead to some underground world. I just hope the inhabitants aren't hostile. Way back in 570 to 495 BC, Pythagoras was a mathematician as well as a philosopher and teacher. Most folks don't know it, but he dealt with the mystic as well. He went as far as to create a commune where his followers could hang out and bask in his presence. The commune consisted of an inner circle, known as the Mathematikio, and the outer circle, known as the Acosematiko. No matter which of the circles you found yourself in, you were there to learn and expand yourself under the tutelage of Pythagoras and his underlings. After some time being treated as a divine person, Pythagoras began to consider himself as being a near deity. He believed in reincarnation and the transmigration of the soul. Soon, he said, he could recognize deceased acquaintances' voices from the sounds of barking dogs. Once the idea of a human soul being transferred into a dog or other animal, Pythagoras became convinced it was wrong to kill any animal in order to eat it. He began to teach his followers to be vegetarians. How about beans? Well, beans were not on the menu. And why not? Pythagoras considered beans to be a sacred fruit and not for human consumption. He said, beans are the substance which contains the largest portion of that animated matter of which our souls are particles. The flowers of the bean, put in a vessel and buried 90 days, would deposit in the bottom of the vessel the head of a child. Pythagoras is supposed to have tried this experiment at some point in his career. This belief was so great that when Pythagoras was being pursued by enemy soldiers, when he came to a bean field, he stopped running and was killed rather than run the risk of stomping on the beans. But the Pythagorean system of belief recognized that, at its most basic, reality is mathematical in nature. This was reflected in music, astronomy, and of course mathematics. The numbers themselves held meaning. 1 is the number of reason. 2 is the first female number. 3 is the first true male number, the number of harmony. 4 is the number of justice. 5 is the number of marriage. And 6 is the number of creation. Also, all numbers were rational, so even nature could be explained rationally. When one of his followers, Hypasus, proved to Pythagoras that the square root of 2 was irrational, Pythagoras did the only thing a rational religious leader would. He had Hypasus murdered. Among other rules of Pythagoras was that you should never stir a fire with an iron, never touch a white rooster, never pick up anything that has fallen. He also believed that men and women were equals and that all property should be communal. Back in 1848, in upper state New York, a new idea came into being. The Oneida community was to be the utopia of the modern world. Well, back then, they thought they were the modern world. John Humphrey Noyes thought he had it right. Among his teachings was the claim that Jesus actually returned to the world in 70 A.D. Another teaching was that the most important part of the community was relationships between the members. Marriage was no longer to be one man and one woman. Instead, there was to be a complex marriage system. Anyone could be married to anyone else for as long or short as they wished. But you didn't want the young folks getting together and having improper relations. Not improper as in illicit, but improper as in you're doing it wrong. Yes, the young folks didn't know enough about being married to everyone else, so the elders would guide the young'uns as to how to properly conduct a married life. Plus, these young folks didn't really know what they wanted in life, so the elders would decide who and when they should be married. I'm sure this was in the best interests of the youth. Just so you don't get the thinking this was just a bunch of dirty old men wishing to have their ways with young girls, the elder women were also allowed to choose young men to teach in the ways of love. The catch was, Only women who had gone through menopause were considered to be elders. There were plenty of rules and regulations to go along with all that complex marrying. With such an eccentric and rigid set of practices, it would be understandable that a process to maintain the principles was essential. Someone came up with something called mutual criticism. The idea is, if you didn't like someone, or something, or anything the community said or did, you could speak out against it. And this could be done at any time or any place. Just imagine you're walking down the street and someone comes up to you complaining about your hair or your shoes. There was no recourse for you other than to stand there and take it. Of course, once the dressing down was finished, it was well within your right to say whatever you thought about your critic. In the real world, this would have been known as an argument. Throughout the 1850s, 1860s, and the 1870s, the community grew and new communities were founded. But with the succession of John Humphrey Noyes' son, Dr. Theodore Noyes, to the leadership of Oneida, cracks began to appear. His agnosticism was probably a stumbling point, but of greater concern was the rigidity of his rules, and many community members were dissatisfied. By 1879, the concept of complex marriage had to be abandoned, and the communities dispersed into the general population. We are all free to choose our own beliefs, but man, why do the crazies always come out from under their rocks with such vim and vigor? The Circle of Friends movement in Germany. Bruno Groening was an energy healer and teacher. Somehow he managed to survive Nazi Germany, even though he was somewhat outspoken against them. After World War II, he set about making the world a better place by healing all who were in need. He only asked that folks have a look for themselves and then decide if he was telling the truth or not. Bruno Groening wasn't all that unusual. He tried to help the only way he could. It wasn't until his death in 1959 that things got interesting. His followers began to insist anyone joining the Circle of Friends should have faith tuned to a radical level. Once Groening was out of the picture, his followers began to amass records of all of his healings. They sought out doctors, medical workers, even veterinarians, demanding copies of any and all healings Groening might have had something to do with. They scoured the countryside looking for any evidence of Groening's work. His healings were then known as Hellstroms. His followers became aware of the energy used by Groening to perform his healings. Then they realized that the church would become more efficient if all the faithful would sit in such a manner as to be facing a portrait of Groening so they could channel his essence. It sounds as if they just went with whatever the head guy came up with. Music at the meetings was restricted to those tunes recognized to have shared the vibrational qualities of Groening's divine energy. Cut flowers were symbols of death and should not be placed anywhere near the photograph. Only potted plants could be used, as these were still filled with the energy of life. As the Circle of Friends spread, the pressing focus of its members moved away from sharing of spirituality and empowering love of God to the all-encompassing need to record and document healings that could be proven as the intercession of Bruno Groening. You might say the bureaucrats had taken over. While there can be no doubt that the work of Groening himself was remarkable, the current standard of achievement is based on the belief that Groening did indeed heal some folks, and everything else is just an afterthought. The Circle of Friends had become a record-keeping church, documenting the works of a man who probably wouldn't have had anything to do with them if he were still alive today. This is a lot like the so-called followers of Martin Luther King today who want to burn, loot, and riot, all in his name. On a small island in the Pacific Ocean, there is a cult with a truly unusual deity. The cult is known as the Yahowanian, and their most divine being is Prince Philip, the consort of Queen Elizabeth II. The inhabitants of Tannin in Vanuatu believe the prince is God, who was born inside the volcano on their island. His pale skin is the proof of his divinity. The basis of the Yananuan belief is rooted hundreds, perhaps thousands of years ago, in the tale of the son of the mountain spirit who ventured across the seas to find a powerful woman to marry. Unlike themselves, for they were only human, the spirit would have had pale skin. In the late 1950s to early 60s, the devout Yahowanian became aware of a tall, pale-skinned man who had married perhaps the most powerful woman on earth, and they began to pay homage to Prince Philip. 1974, their faith was strengthened by a visit by Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth II. This was seen as the son of the mountain spirit returning to show them his wife. Prince Philip is well aware of the cult, and while not encouraging their perceptions of his god status, he did send photographs and other gifts to the tribe, including one of himself holding a ceremonial club. The photographs were held as religious symbols, and the chief of the tribe says the image is proof that the prince is God. Prince Philip was known for being a racist, who never missed an opportunity to make nasty comments about anyone not British. Things like, if you stay in China too long, your eyes will become all squinty. Or, this device looks as if it were put together by an Indian. That's dot, not feather. The Yanawanian tribesmen carry out ceremonies and rituals, including a special festival on June 10th, Prince Philip's birthday, to which neighboring tribes are invited. Their expectation is to see the prince return to them, and when he doesn't, they, like all good disciples, know that his spirit is with them, even if he can't be there in person. And once more, we're going to take a short break here to play a couple of commercials. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Do you have skin? Would you like to take better care of it? Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and set up an appointment. Call 723-3019. If your vision isn't what it used to be, and you're not sure you're seeing Bigfoot or just your neighbor mowing his lawn, stop on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle del Norte, just across the street from the Embassy Suites. You should be able to see what you're looking at. Looking for a great cup of coffee? Swing on by the Organic Man Coffee Truck, 1002 Eaterby Day, Suite number 7. Not a coffee drinker? They have hot chocolate, hot tea, and sometimes muffins and cookies. It's a great place to meet your friends for a conversation or curl up in the corner with a good book. The Organic Man Coffee Truck. Life is too short to drink bad coffee.
Though we gotta say goodbye.
No, don't say goodbye. Stay with us. This is Arcanelza Radio. Quédate con nosotros. Estás escuchando Arcanelza Radio.
You're listening to Strange Things with Chris James. And welcome back. So far, we've covered some rather unusual belief systems. Here's one that might get you excited. The Iglesia Maradoniana. I practiced that one at home and still screwed it up. The Iglesia Maradoniana. Okay, too many letters. It sounds like a church to me. However, this church is based on sports. Now, I know soccer's a big thing in a lot of folks' lives, but this is a bit over the top. It all started during the 1986 World Cup soccer match between Argentina and England. Argentina's captain, Diego Maradona, number 10, remember that number, it comes into play later on, kicked the first goal of the game and dubbed it the Hand of God goal. This really upset the English team and their fans because Maradona didn't kick the ball, but he used his hand to knock the ball into the goal, which is illegal. But the refs let the score count. Even Maradona admitted he'd used his hand. But Argentina was allowed to count this goal as well as the next, giving Argentina a 2-1 win. Seeing as the first goal was not legal, the game should have been a tie. And no wonder soccer fans get so riled up. On Maradona's 38th birthday, a handful of fanatics in the city of Rosario founded the Iglesia Maradoniana, a.k.a. the Maradonian Church. This new church was not an overnight success. It didn't really become popular until 2001. This could have been because in 2001, the church held its first meeting. But 10 years later, the membership was up to 80,000 folks and had established congregations in 60 countries. Unlike just about every church on the planet, the Maradonians only meet twice a year. Noche Buena, which is the celebration of Christmas, and then June 22nd, which is the anniversary of the big game where Argentina won against England. Iglesia Maradoniana sets out some important rules for their members, and these can be largely described as the 10 Commandments of the Church. The ball must not be stained, as Dios has proclaimed. Dios is spelled D for Diego, 10, his number, and an S. Dios in Latin is God. Love football over all things. Declare your unconditional love of football. Defend the colors of Argentina. Preach the words of Diego Maradona all over the world. Pray in the temples where he preached and to his sacred mantles. Do not proclaim the name of Diego in the name of a single club. follow the teachings of the Maradonian Church. Let Diego be your second name and that of your children. Lastly, he says, don't be a hothead and don't let the turtle escape you. In other words, don't lose your marbles. One of the 10 apostles of the church has been quoted as saying, the church isn't just a bit of fun. This is a serious celebration of our eternal love for God. I may have only been a part of the church for 2 years, but I was born a Maradonian. So, we have a church based on one game of soccer of the 1983 World Cup. I'll bet there aren't any branches in England, and most people think American football is over the top. Next, we have a group of folks who all worship a fictional story. The Church of All Worlds was founded by Oberon Zell Ravenheart, who based much of his church on a book. Now, I know most religions are based on a book called the Bible, but Oberon based his religion on a book called Stranger in a Strange Land, a science fiction story written by Robert Heinlein. The story, A Stranger in a Strange Land, focuses on a human raised on Mars and his adaptation to an understanding of humans and their culture. It is set in the post-apocalyptic world following World War III in the United States. Organized religions are politically powerful in this new land. There is a World Federation of Free Nations. I guess it's kind of like the United Nations and probably about as useful. The U.S. has been demilitarized with a world government supported by special service troops, the Blue Helmets, which are kind of useless. A manned expedition is mounted to visit the planet Mars, but contact is lost after the crew has landed. A second expedition is launched 25 years later. They find a single survivor, Valentine Michael Smith. Smith was born on the spacecraft en route to Mars, and he was raised entirely by the Martians. He is ordered by the Martians to accompany the expedition once they return to Earth. Because Smith is unaccustomed to the conditions on Earth, he is confined at a Bethesda hospital. He has never seen a human female, so he is attended by male staff only. Seeing this restriction as a challenge, Nurse Gillian Bardman eludes the guards and goes in to visit Smith. She shares a glass of water with him and inadvertently becomes his first female water brother, considered a profound relationship by the Martians. Eventually, Smith starts a Martian-influenced Church of All Worlds, combining elements of Fosterite cult, mainly the sexual aspects, with Western esoteric religion. The members learn the Martian language, and this allows them to acquire psychokinetic abilities. That means they can move things with their mind. The church is eventually besieged by the Fosterites, who claim they are committing blasphemy, and the church is destroyed. Unknown to the public, Smith's followers have teleported themselves to safety. Based on the religion from Stranger in a Strange Land, the Church of All Worlds includes aspects of science fiction and some Greek mythology. They use contemporary fiction and a healthy dose of the Druid religion as well. The Church of All Worlds has tried to remain contemporary and has now dipped into more current fiction to create the Grey School of Wizardry, which has a lot of similarities to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry found in the Harry Potter novels. The church sells educational supplies which can be purchased through Magic Alley, and its Grey Council boasts an extensive list of practitioners, including the longest continuously practicing Wiccan in the world. Their stated mission works towards the reawakening of Gaia. Gaia is better known as Mother Nature or the Earth Mother, and was the creator of just about everything. The board of directors of the church go out of their way to include teachings and cultures from all over the place. They use shamanism, as well as teachings and plots based on movies and books. The church isn't greedy, as far as I can tell. They charge a whopping $30 a year to enroll in their Grey School of Wizardry for kids. It's only $60 for an adult. That's for the whole year. They may not sound like a real religion, but they seem to be quite sincere in their teachings. Valentine Michael Smith has a Facebook page, so they're keeping up on modern trends. The Sky Kingdom has to be one of the most all-encompassing groups out there. The founder, Arifin Mohammed, says he is the reincarnation of the God of Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and Hinduism. Wow, talk about multitasking. He wants to be everyone's God all at once. This religion was started in Malaysia, a country that is over 60% Muslim. This has led to some nastiness in the form of persecution under the guise of Sharia law. The claim is it's against the law to change from Muslim to anything else. Surprisingly, the Sky Kingdom has grown over the years instead of diminishing. Just to put icing on the cake, the church was built to look like a giant teapot. Water shoots out of the spout and lands in a fountain that is the same shape of, what else? A cup. If you don't feel like communing inside a teapot, you can sit under the giant yellow umbrella and bask in the shade of God. The entire complex was built from a dream the founder had had one night. The Sky Kingdom is known for inviting religious groups to come and preach at the compound. This has led to the government arresting some members and, under the pretext they are trying to turn folks away from Allah. The good people of the Sky Kingdom are still working to spread the word to all who will listen and try to avoid being beheaded. Now, if you're looking for a very laid-back religion, then look no further than solipsism. There is no ritual for worship. They believe that their every thought or idea is the correct way to be. If it pops into their head, then it must come from God. But then, their God isn't some old bearded man sitting in heaven. No, they believe God is everywhere and in everything. I talk about all-encompassing. Not just the conscious mind, but it covers the unconscious mind as well. René Descartes laid the groundwork for solipsism through his introduction of methodic doubt into the world of philosophy, and in turn his questioning of all of our physical senses, until he resolved the search for existence in the brilliant saying, "I think, therefore I am." It didn't take much to go from this small statement, "I think, therefore I am," to a philosophy of "I think, therefore I only am." In other words, since I can think, I am the only thing of any value in the entire universe. This is great if you're one of those folks who thinks God doesn't exist and you control your own destiny. This also gives the option of ignoring anything you don't like or understand. If you think it doesn't matter, then it doesn't. You can think everything into existence or non-existence. The major quandary of this cult is anything bad going on in the world would be their fault, since they have to think it into creation. All they have to do is watch the news for a few minutes to realize either their religion is hogwash or there are some very sick people. We're going to take a brief pause right now and play a couple of commercials so I don't have to interrupt the next little bit because you don't want to miss the next part. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after this. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Do you have skin? Would you like to take better care of it? Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and set up an appointment. Call 723-3019. If your vision isn't what it used to be, and you're not sure you're seeing Bigfoot or just your neighbor mowing his lawn, stop on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle del Norte, just across the street from the Embassy Suites. You should be able to see what you're looking at. Looking for a great cup of coffee? Swing on by the Organic Man Coffee Truck, 1002 Eaterby Day, suite number 7. Not a coffee drinker? They have hot chocolate, hot tea, and sometimes muffins and cookies. It's a great place to meet your friends for a conversation or curl up in the corner with a good book. The Organic Man Coffee Truck. Life is too short to drink bad coffee.
No, don't say goodbye. Stay with us. This is Arkanasa Radio. Quédate con nosotros. Estás escuchando Arkanasa Radio.
You're listening to Strange Things with Chris James. And welcome back. And like I said, you don't want to miss this next one because these guys have definitely stepped off the planet. The Church of Euthanasia. No, that's not youth in Asia. Euthanasia is the practice of intentionally ending a life in order to relieve pain or suffering, or in this case, to make the world a better place for those in charge. If you saw the movie Soylent Green or Logan's Run, you saw a good example of this practice. People keep saying that this planet is overpopulated. They think it's their duty to do something about it. Kind of like in China, where they wanted to become a superpower based on the number of people in their domain. Then one day they woke up and discovered they had more people than they could feed. So the government initiated a one-child law. This would soon reduce the number of starving people by cutting the population down by nearly half. This led to a nasty problem. In China, the son is expected to provide for the family once they get too old to manage. But if you have a girl, well, she goes away and marries some other guy, and you get nothing back but a visit from the grandchildren. The couples began killing off any girls so they could try to have a boy next time. This was especially prevalent in rural communities. Since China was communist and God didn't exist, there was no penalty for this behavior. This led to a new problem. The boys outnumber the girls something like 2-1. This is going to make finding a wife a whole lot of a problem. The girls can be very choosy in who they go out with. I can see it now. Rent a bride. The Church of Euthanasia wants to reduce the world's population by encouraging abortions, suicide, and cannibalism to thin the herd. They're very vocal against anti-abortion groups, as well as any efforts to keep our elderly alive any longer. Some have suggested putting a time stamp on your life. Once you reach a certain age, it's off to the food mills you go. Soylent Green, if you saw the movie. The church has one commandment: thou shalt not procreate. They claim to be opposed to murder or involuntary sterilization, but there are some in the group who have voiced their opinion. Some have said, save the planet, kill yourself. Why do they want us to die? Why not themselves first? If they're so intent on saving this planet, they should lead by example. But no, they want to save it for themselves. The church does public interest training, but it only involves how to kill yourself. I hope our tax dollars are not going to support this bunch. The members encourage others to die to make the world a better place, but when asked why they are still alive, they always fall back on their founder's answer: I will kill myself when I want to. Back in 1997, the comet Hale-Bopp was visible to the naked eye. We've watched it pass by the planet, and I felt like it was a good time to be alive to see it. But others took it in a different way. The Heaven's Gate cult thought it was a good time to die. They committed suicide in their palatial mansion in San Diego, but this wasn't the only bizarre act they had committed. Marshall Applewhite was the son of a Presbyterian minister and a former soldier. After being fired from the University of St. Thomas in Houston, he began his foray into biblical prophecy in the early 1970s. Who do I know at St. Thomas today? Applewhite met and married Bonnie Nettles. Then they began building their cult and trying to make contact with extraterrestrials. In a bid to draw more converts, they would run ads in the newspapers announcing gatherings in their area where the purpose was to call E.T. Soon they had a congregation in hand. At first, the cult was called The Crew. They told their followers that Applewhite was the reincarnation of Jesus. They used a lot of nicknames like Bo and Peep, or Duh and T, as well as the UFO too. They managed to get lots of people to believe their extraterrestrial teachings to the point that the men were all castrated, just because. You won't be needing those anymore. Then, as Hale-Bopp became visible in the night sky, Applewhite discovered the ultimate way to ascend to the heavens. On Coast to Coast AM, Art Bell announced that Jonathan Reed, a guest on the show, had spotted a strange anomaly in the tail of the comet. The guest said it was a UFO. Now, he didn't mean it was unidentified. He meant it was some kind of spacecraft. I listened to the show that night. Applewhite must have been listening too, because he told his away team to get ready to go. They all dressed in black uniform-looking costumes. They each had a $5 bill to cover expenses. I guess the commissary on the spaceship still cost money. They also each had 3 quarters so they could make phone calls home. Right. A giant extraterrestrial spaceship, and it has a payphone. You never see that on Star Trek. Lieutenant Uhura, contact Starfleet. Please deposit the correct change, unless you wish to make a collect call. And how much would that have cost? The Heaven's Gate away team all took phenobarbital mixed with vodka, and then they tied plastic bags over their heads. And then they went away. Authorities found the 39 bodies all laying in their bunk beds, nice and neat. They lived in a multi-million-dollar mansion, and they slept in bunk beds. Over the years, many other followers of the religion, after the big exit, had decided to follow in their leader's footsteps. The Nation of Yahweh is a predominantly African American religious group that is the most controversial offshoot of the Black Hebrew Israelite line of thought. They were founded in 1979 in Miami by Hulan Mitchell Jr., who went by the name Yahweh ben Yahweh. Their goal is to return African Americans, whom they see as the original Israelites, to Israel. They have their own Son of God living right there in their midst. Yahweh ben Yahweh, a.k.a. Hulan Mitchell Jr., claims to be the Son of God, and his followers believe him. They also claim to be the true Israelites, and all the rest are just the white devils. Due to their over-the-top radical preachings, they have been labeled as a black supremacist group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, as well as the Miami Herald. So far, all they've done is preach. They haven't taken to the streets to weed out the white devils. Yet. The universe people, or cosmic people of light, powers, is a Czech religious movement centered around Ivo a Benda. Its belief system is based upon the existence of extraterrestrial civilizations communicating with Benda and other contactees beginning in October of 1997. They received their messages by telepathy as well as direct personal contact. According to Benda, those civilizations operate a fleet of spaceships led by Ashtar Sharon, orbiting the Earth. They closely watch and help the good and are waiting to transport their followers in another dimension. The universe people's teachings incorporate various elements from ufology, Christianity, and conspiracy theories. These folks should have their own podcasts. Nawabiism is an umbrella term used to refer to the doctrines and teachings of the followers of Dwight York. The Nawabians originated as black Muslim group in New York in 1970s and have gone through many changes ever since. The group moved from New York to Putnam County, Georgia in 1993, but they had to close their main facility there due to some unethical behavior on the part of their spiritual leader. Dwight had been convicted of money laundering and child molestation and is now serving time in the big house. The cult had been formed using all kinds of esoteric thoughts from all kinds of other cults, like Theosophy, which was formed in New York City back in 1875 by Helena Blavatsky. This was one of the many teachings that the Nazis had used. Dwight also used some Astora, which is a form of energy healing. Then he mixed in a bunch of Rosicrucian ideas. Rosicrucianism refers to a cultural movement which arose in Europe in the early 17th century, after the publication of several texts which purported to announce the existence of a hitherto unknown esoteric order to the world and made seeking its knowledge attractive to many. Rosicrucians have been linked to the Masons on several occasions. There is also some Moorish Science Temple teachings, a bit of Christianity, Islam, Qadiani. Let's just say it's a bits and pieces of a lot of different religions. The best part of their teachings is the idea that the white race was created as a bunch of killers who enslaved the black people as a way to keep them down. Too bad Dwight didn't read more history. Most slaves were captured, bought, and sold by Muslims, and then shipped and sold to the white slave owners. But what with all the mixing and matching going on, you can't expect too much truth to be used, not if you're planning on laundering money and molesting children. They had some off-the-wall teachings like, it is important to bury the afterbirth so that Satan does not use it to make a duplicate of the recently born child. Some aborted fetuses have survived their abortion to live on in the sewers, where they are being gathered and organized to take over the world. Kind of like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but without the shells. People were once perfectly symmetrical and ambidextrous, but then a meteorite struck the earth and tilted it off its axis, causing right or left-handedness and shifting the heart off-center in the chest. Each of us has 7 clones, living in different parts of the world. Now, I know this is true because I've met a few folks who looked an awful lot like me and acted kind of the same, too. Okay, not really. Women existed for many generations before they invented men through genetic manipulation. So, it wasn't Adam's rib after all. It was Eve in a test tube. Homo sapiens is a result of cloning experiments that were done on Mars using Homo erectus. Now we're talking. Nikola Tesla came from the planet Venus. Now that would explain a lot. Lastly, they believe the Illuminati have nurtured a child, Satan's son, who was born on the 6th of June in 1966 at the Dakota House on 72nd Street in New York to Jacqueline Kennedy of the Rothschild Kennedy families. The Pope was in presence at the birth, and he performed a necromancon ceremony. The child was raised by former U.S. President Richard Nixon, and it now lives in Belgium, where it is hooked up bodily to a computer called the Beast 3M, or the 3666. Now, this has got to be something even Art Bell would never allow on his show. This is right up there with JC and his boiling pits of sewage. If you're looking for a new religion, I'd advise to steer clear of the Nawabians. They have some issues. I hope you found tonight's show thrilling and informative. If you'd like to contact us, the email address is strangethings@arkanasa.com, or just look for Strange Things with Chris James on the Facebook. Next Saturday, we'll be looking into the Loch Ness Monster. There have been some more sightings, so listen up. Thanks for joining the show, and we will be back next week.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they say murder 3? Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.